You remember the last week we were talking about a situation of a couple people who sold something and didn't come up with all of the truth. I've had a chance to sell a lot of vehicles. I know Terry sold a lot of vehicles. I know that Trent sold a lot of vehicles. And you know what one of the most common questions I get when I sell a vehicle? Will you turn in less price than what you're actually selling it for? Does that make sense to you, the reasoning behind it? Well, sure. If you sold something for $5,000 and the tax is 7%, pretend. If you turn in $2,000 and they pay 7%, then they've saved a lot of money. And I said, no, I can't do that. I'm a religious person, and that's not right. You know, every single time, Tim, you know what happened? The person said, okay. Never a rebuttal about religious thoughts. Never any comment about doing something dishonest after you tell them you're not going to. Annis and Sapphira, as you well know, took their chances and lost. Is that correct? Took their chances and lost. All right, if you would please, 12 through 15. 12 through 15. And John Frame, if I could please, would you mind reading 12 through 15? I would prefer to be down on the floor with you, but Chris would yell at me because it wouldn't show on the TV. So that's the reason I'm up here. I would prefer to be down there, but John, if you would please.
And by the hands of the apostles were many signs and wonders wrought among the people, and they were all in one accord in Solomon's porch. And of the rest durst no man join himself to them, but people magnified them. And believers were the more added to the Lord, multitudes both of men and women, insomuch that they brought forth the sick into the streets, and laid them on beds and couches, that at the least the shadow of Peter passing by might overshadow some of them.
What's the purpose of signs and wonders? Do you know, Pete?
The onlookers, that there's a power above nature.
Anybody else? What's the purpose, Tim, of signs and wonders? Then how come it didn't work? Or did it? Exactly. Some did and some didn't. If I said to you, I can standing broad jump 15 feet, what would you say? Show me.
What's a standing broad jump?
Will you consider 2 feet instead of 15?
That was only a foot and a half.
That was metric. Now, come on. You understand what I'm saying? You want to see proof. They wanted to see proof. Signs and wonders. According to the net, signs are guides to warn people, execute divine judgment, and deliver people from oppression. Seems to be pretty fair when you say, John. That seems to cover some of the bases. So these folks saw, and like Tim said, some believed and some didn't. Anybody in here, Terry, close your ears. Anybody in here watch America's Got Talent? Anybody has seen America's Got Talent? Well, if somebody makes a motorcycle disappear, you say, I know that that can't be, correct? You say, I know that, but you wonder and think about, and that's probably part of the situation. Signs and wonders to get people to realize the power and authority of God. Okay? Purpose of the signs is to point people to God. Verse 13. Tim, if you would, please, or if you're not ready yet, not a problem. Someone have 13 handy? 13. Bill Welsh, if you would, please. Verse 13.
And of the rest durst no man join himself to them, but people magnified them.
Why not?
Well, 2 people just died, so I think I would be a little bit afraid myself, but they are still holding him in high esteem, it says in another version.
Is there sometimes it's best to keep your thoughts in your mouth to yourself? Sure. Sometimes it's best to think before you speak. The Bible talks about that situation. Highly regarded by the people, but they still couldn't join in with the apostles. When I was growing up, there were 3 boys on our street. If 2 of us were playing together and the third one come along, it's like the third man out. Does that make sense, John? The third man, hey, you're just kind of crowding in here. But if you change positions and 2 of the 3 were together and another one was out, it was the same scenario. It just like seemed these people wanted to be in, but they could not be in a situation. Down at Cambridge, Terry, you might remember this, but down at Cambridge, they have a courthouse. Guernsey County Courthouse is right in the middle of Cambridge. And they had a little underneath the courthouse place where guys would go and play checkers. Old guys. They still do that, Terry, do you know? Old guys would go there and play checkers, and I shoot the breeze and see some new thing, if you will. And old guys. And sometimes when I say that to Linda, I was driving and some old guy just cut in front of me. She said, how old was he? I said, I don't know, maybe 7. Got to be careful about that. I'm 77 now, you know what? So that's a relative term. But anyway, these guys would play checkers. Now, I'm pretty sure if some young person would go in there and say, can I play checkers with you guys today? They would probably say, well, I don't know. I don't know about some new guy coming in here. We have our established group. I don't know about somebody new. So sometimes just because you'd like to be in, you can't be in until whatever reason you're accepted to be that situation. Okay? Verse 14, read it to yourself, please. What's added to mean, Tim?
Included, connected to, members of.
Why does the Bible speak of people being added to the Lord's church rather than join? Ever think about that? Try to find a passage that says people joined the church. What do you think, Charles? Why does it say added, and the Lord added to? Why not joined?
Well, join would imply that they just latched on as opposed to being added, meaning God receives them, brings them in rather than they, certainly we need to do things, but it's still in God's hands. And, so added to is, I did it. Join would be you did it. So.
Thought question for you. Is it possible for a person to obey the scriptures and not be added to the church? Terry, what do you think?
Did you say obey?
Person obeys the scriptures and still not be added to the church. Is that possible?
I don't think so.
Anybody else's thought?
No. Depends on what you mean by added, by following, because we would describe people as following the scriptures if they fulfill a lot of them. If they're a good moral person, we generally say, yeah, they're following the scriptures. But in the most strict sense, they may not be obeying the gospel, but they may be following the general moral principles. So it depends on what you meant by that. Right?
Okay. Now, I'm not advocating this as truth. This is Jerry's opinion. I think that God adds to the church because he knows their heart and I don't. That's my opinion. A young couple was a friend of Linda's and mine many, many years ago down in Cambridge. His wife was a member of the church. He was not. My understanding from the situation was he obeyed the gospel to get her off of his back as to, you need to do this thing. Was he added to the church? He obeyed the scriptures, was baptized, but his heart wasn't right. Now, I can't speak for God, can you? But I just wonder, did God really add him to, or did he just go through some motions to please her and not him, and his heart was not right? So did he really obey the scriptures? Confessing, and I'll let you decide that.
Is it one of the prerequisites of belief?
Believe, yes.
Scriptures say, arise and be baptized for the remission of your sin. If it's for any other reason, it's not obedience.
So, like I said, I'm not preaching this as truth, but I just wonder, John. God knew his heart. Is he one of my sheep? You decide. No, he was pleasing someone, and the someone wasn't God, from my understanding of the situation.
And the scriptures also tell us that many will say unto me that on that day, have we not prophesied, have we not? And the idea is, haven't we obeyed your word? And God's reply to them is, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I know you not.
15 and 16, Tim, if you have that handy now, please.
The print is so small. So that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at least the shadow of Peter passing by might fall on some of them. Also a multitude gathered from surrounding cities to Jerusalem, bringing sick people and those who were tormented by unclean spirits, and they were all healed.
I wonder what their thinking would have been if it was a cloudy day. Never thought about that, did you? Would their faith have been different? Isn't that what this is an example of, their faith, that just the shadow? Now, another question that I wonder about, were these people interested in the word that Jesus spoke? What do you think, John? Do you think these folks that were thinking about the shadow were interested in his religious message? What comes to your mind, John?
Additionally, it could be they were interested in being healed. However, that gives, as we seen earlier in the other chapters, that gives them an opportunity to hear the message. Gets them interested.
What was the purpose of these miracles? Was it to heal the people? Well, of course. Was it to demonstrate the authority of God? Of course. Was it a dual purpose, like John is saying? Can you teach someone very easily that's hungry and thirsty, tired and worn out? Is that a good time to teach someone anything if those 3 or 4 things are present? Well, yes, you can still do it, but isn't it easier to teach? Do you remember a whole bunch of people were assembled together? We need some food for these people because they've been around and they're just kind of faint, just kind of hungry. Well, what happened? They were fed, weren't they? Fish and bread and that sort of thing. So it seems to me the purpose is, in order to get them ready, prepared, and going the right direction, we need to take care of some physical things. I'm just kind of wondering about this too. They can see these great wonders and miracles and signs that I'm doing, and hopefully that'll get them on the trail to listening to my message. Yes?
I think, the same, you could apply that same logic today, even outside of this book of Acts, and, our good works are supposed to glorify the Father. In James chapter 2, verse 15 through 16 says, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to him, go in peace, be warm and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also by itself, it does not have works instead.
So your point being is exactly what we're talking about. These folks, in case you didn't hear what she said. Verse 17, does anyone have a comment or a question so far, Charles?
Well, it does seem like the mechanism that's going on here is not people just curiously coming out and saying, hey, heal me. But, verse 14 tells us these are people that believed and were adding. And then it says that the people who were added, were bringing people that were sick. And evidently it was effective because by verse 17, the Pharisees are indignant. They're not happy about what's happening. So what we have is, someone who has become a Christian says to their brother or their sister or their father or mother or something, hey, this is what's happening. Let me take you here and get you healed. They're healed, and then in many cases they are converted, and the people who are opposed to this are not happy about the growth that's happening. But the mechanism seems to be, it wasn't just people wandering around the streets and, oh, hey, take care of me. It's people who believe were bringing people to.
Good point. did you ever think or wonder what it would be like in another day and time of our history if you could go backwards and be there for a short period of time? Have you ever had that happen to you? I would like to see dinosaurs. Hide behind a rock, of course. Someplace that's safe, and just see the magnitude and the size and so forth. I would also like to be present to see some of these great wonders and signs that our Master did, wouldn't you? How amazing it would have to be. Verse 16. There came also a multitude out of the cities round about into Jerusalem, bringing sick folks. Do you ever wonder why they didn't bring well folks? I'm going to ask you a question now, and I want you to respond. I know you won't be embarrassed. I'm going to ask the same question in the assembly if I remember in the message. How many of you, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you would be baptized for someone else so that they can enjoy heaven if that's the way that it worked? We would all like to see, but it doesn't work that way, does it? Who are we responsible for? I didn't hear what you said. Who are we responsible for? Ourselves. That alleviates me from talking to Tim about his soul. No, doesn't work that way. It works way me first. Several years ago when we lived in Sherrodsville, there was a traveling sales group of people that come around selling sweepers. And I know better. I do. Can I demonstrate this sweeper? Okay. I don't want to take a long time to do this. Not a problem. It'll only be about an hour. I can't believe that Linda never cleaned our house. Has anybody had that? And they run that water over the furniture, and you say, I can't believe that. And I said to the guy, let's pretend it was a Hoover sweeper. I said, do you have a Hoover sweeper? He said, no. Oh, no, I was just kidding. Yes, I have a, and he used the product. But that's what I'm trying to illustrate. If you don't use the product, you can't sell the product, can you? You need to be a religious person, are you? Well, no, I'm thinking about it. No, it doesn't work that way. Why didn't they take well folks? What do well folks need? They need the religious portion of it. Maybe there were some well folks there. We don't know. Verse 17, unless you have a question. Then the high priest rose up, and all they that were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and were filled with indignation. Why? Why are they upset? People are being healed. People are being taught as far as they know, so why are they upset?
Something they had no control over, and they wanted control over it.
They wanted to have control over it. What's it, Charles? They wanted to have control over it.
Have control over people through religion.
If you can control people's minds, what can you control? Just about everything, can't you? Isn't that what you have about? Yeah. Isn't that what brainwashing is, Tom? You say, why in the world would people drink Kool-Aid laced with strychnine or some other poison just because somebody said to? Well, they thought that's what they needed to do. And as I mentioned last week, and I can, for whatever reason, I never forget this. It happened when I was a freshman down at Ohio University in 1963. The professor said, at the moment people do things, at that moment it seems to be the right thing to do. Oh, no, that can't be. Now, you think about that. At that moment. Now, after the moment's over and they think about it, that's a different matter, isn't it, Tom? Well, man, I got more facts here and I got more information. That was rather stupid to do. But right, Tim, at that moment, they thought it was the right thing to do no matter how stupid, how bad, how poor, how whatever it is. Those folks had gone and drank that, and I know that you know the situation.
That's where the phrase, hey, y'all watch this comes from. At that moment, it seemed like a good idea.
Let's see if we can run across the interstate and not get hit by a car. Yeah, let's do that. You go first. So I can observe what not to do or what to do. But you see, at that moment, it seemed to be the right thing, but after thinking and meditation, not the right thing. What do we know about the Sanhedrins? What do we know about that group of individuals? John, can you give us a fact? What do we know about them?
A group of leaders that were supposed to oversee everything. High priest had a lot of sway on it.
Okay.
The Sadducees were, they were, in a lot of ways, ultra conservative. Many of them did not believe in what we would call, they have the term Torah or Torah, which would be essentially, we call it Pentateuch, the first five books. And then they have what they call a Tanakh, which would be what we would call the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them didn't believe all of that.
Right.
They believed the first five books, but not the others. So that leaves out all the prophets and many other things in history.
That's kind of like saying, I believe the first part of your story, but I don't believe the second part of your story, like you were saying. Go back to Acts chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Acts chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. And as they spake unto the people, the priests and the captain of the temple and the Sadducees came upon them, being grieved that they taught the people and preached through Jesus a resurrection from the dead. So their name is mentioned there again. They're pretty prominent, if that be the correct term. Pretty prominent. Acts 23 and 8, if someone would turn over there. Michael Fountain, if you would, please. Older Michael. 23, 8.
Acts 23.
Yes.
The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees believe all these things.
So there's a little bit more information that the Bible tells us about this group of individuals, and we kind of put a little package together. Now, once you say something against what they were thinking, isn't that fuel for the fire? Who in here, and you don't have to admit it if you don't want to, but I know you're sitting out there, who in here has thrown gasoline or a fire starter on a fire? Sure. What was the purpose of it? Well, to get it to burn better and faster. Did you ever have it fall apart way back and say, bad idea? Well, I see some heads, yes, you've done that sort of thing. Sometimes it works, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes you burn up the grass around your grill. Yeah, I see some heads. I guess I'm not the only one who has done that sort of thing, and I feel good about that. But here again, adding fuel to the fire, the teaching of the New Testament and Jesus and his followers and that sort of thing, added a lot. Terry.
I was just thinking here, I think there's a little parallel today, what's going on, especially in this country as well as around the world, that there are a certain part of society that doesn't want you to do anything with religion. That's not enough. They just don't want you to have anything to do with it. And they want to control that. They want you separated from a God, the God, as a higher power or yield to a higher power. They don't want to hear it, but they won't leave you alone and let you do that. They want you completely separated or silenced from it. And it's happening in places in other parts of the world right now, but it's coming here. In fact, even in the church.
Yes.
You know that.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
documented. And it's almost like misery loves, company loves misery, or however you say it. And they don't want you to do that on your own. They just don't want to hear it. They want completely separated from society, religion. And right now in this country, it's coming from the top down. And it's not a political statement or anything, but it is, right from the pulpit. Right there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth leaders in this country right now and burn this building down, probably nothing would happen. And they're trying to restrict religion, and it's coming in various ways. I've talked to you about it, talked to Tim about it, it is coming. They have so many religions right now tied up or persuaded that they've changed their philosophies and or their doctrine or so on to fit in with that narrative. There's very few standing today. The Church of Christ is one of them. Very few. I mean, here, but around the world, the Church of Christ. And I think we're going to be the last ones to be assaulted because they're coming. And when I say they, anybody that doesn't want anything to do with religion. And I didn't mean to take up your time.
No, that's fine.
If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, what you said reminds me of a story. It's not about you. You can relax this time. A woman had 2 children, and the neighbors were members of the church and asked the mom if the kids could go to vacation Bible school. The mom said the kids asked her mom if they could go to vacation Bible school. Well, if I let the kids go, they may ask me to work with the cookies or the food. They may ask me to work or do something else. And if they do that, then I'll be put on the spot. And I don't want to be put on the spot. No, you can't go. If you get involved is what I'm saying, Terry. If you don't get involved, it doesn't always work that way, does it? Back to 17, Acts chapter 5, verse 17. We talked about this group of individuals. Verse 18, and laid their hands on the apostles and put them in a common prison. Why? If they're absent, maybe the people will settle down. Does that make sense to you? If we put them in jail, they're out of the situation. But what do you think is going through the apostles' mind when this is happening to them? They'll state my answer in just a minute, but what do you think, Terry, that they are thinking if they put us in jail or prison or whatever the word might be? What do you think they're thinking? And they plainly state, if you've read ahead or have studied this before, what is their platform that they stand behind, Charles? The apostles. You can put us in jail and you can beat us and you can tell us to shut up and you can do all these things, but what's the answer, Charles?
They were still going to share the gospel.
We're still going to share the gospel and do what God told us to do. Is that right, Mike? Doesn't matter what you do to us. Doesn't the Bible have other passages that don't worry about what man can do to you? What's the rest of it? You remember, Bill? What's the rest? Don't worry about what man can do to you, but yes, you got to move forward. Worry about what God and His Word says, not what man. So what are you saying? Nobody, nothing is going to shut these men up from teaching. Is that right, Tim? Not going to do it. Judy?
I think part of the reason that throwing them in jail is to intimidate the rest of the people that if you follow them, this is what's going to happen to you. And that goes on yet today.
Yes.
It's happening right now.
Yes. Long story short, does it work?
It's called cancel culture.
Yeah. Does it work, Tom? Oh, sorry, I didn't know Tom stepped out. Does it work? Once people get something in your mind, if you get it in your mind that you're going to buy a refrigerator, you can find 100 things wrong with the old one, even though it still cools and works, right? But I've got it in my mind, we're getting a new refrigerator. When did you want it? Yesterday. And you go to the store and say, we can't deliver within your area for 2 weeks. You got to be kidding me. I want it now. Put these apostles in jail, get them off the street, get their teaching stopped among other people from hearing it. That'll solve the problem. Bad thinking and wrong. Didn't solve the problem. In fact, it probably made it even better. Because once they get out, look at the greatness of these guys and how God is with them and helping them, and they're doing His will. Does that make sense to you? We're going to put them away. They're out doing what they're supposed to be doing. Making a greater statement, I think, inside the people than they were doing before. Why were they jealous? I think Tim mentioned that. Why were they jealous? Because they're taking supporters away. And that adds strength to the other group. 21, if you would, volunteer to read. Going.
When they heard that they entered into the temple early in the morning and taught. But the high priest came, and they that were with him, and called the council together, and all the senate of the children of Israel, and sent to the prison to have them brought.
All right, so the solution is we're going to get these fellows and bring them in before us and do what, although it's not said right now. We want these to be in front of us, present before us. For what purpose, Pete, do you think?
To imprison everybody, well, keep them quiet.
Would you go along with the idea they're going to question them and try to win whatever they think wins? Does that make sense to you, Terry? We're going to get these in, we're going to call them in, ask them a bunch of questions, and we're going to try to win this situation in front of all the people and use our authority. And as you well know, as we continue on, did not work. They are interested in how it happened, but it doesn't seem that they're really interested in the spreading of the situation. But let's see what else we can find in the next few verses, okay? All right, as we continue on, 21 to 24. And when they heard that they entered in the temple early in the morning and taught, but the high priest came, and they that were with him, and called the council together, and all the estate, and that sort of thing. Got a setting here. Verse 22, but when the officers came and found them not in a prison, they returned and told, saying, the prison truly found we shut with all safety, and the keepers standing without the doors, but when we had opened, we found no man within. Now when the high priest and the captain of the temple and the chief priests heard these things, they doubted of them whereunto this would grow. What's going on here? Give me an idea in your thinking. What's going on? Tim?
Minor intervention,
Okay.
They weren't in the prison. It doesn't tell us how they got out, but if it was secured, it had to be in God's hands. And they were out doing what they had been told not to do.
They're supposed to be in jail, aren't they?
Don't you think at some point that would have been a red light to at least a few of them?
I would think. I know that Superman is faster than a speeding bullet. But I want to tell you, he's not faster than Jonah is. Not too long ago. Where's Jonah? Well, I thought he was with you. Where's Jonah? I thought he was with you. He's out the door, Amy. He crosses the street. We live on a cul-de-sac, so there's little, if any, transportation moving back and forth. He's across the street. He's in my neighbor's garage in their car. I jump onto my bicycle. How many of you know that feeling of, in your stomach? What? I jump on my bike and I'm getting ready to go up the street, and my neighbor says, he's over here. Man, I feel good. I'm glad he can't drive. But these guys are supposed to be in jail. And the head guy comes along and says, they ain't here. Now, heads are going to roll, right? You're in charge. You're supposed to be taken care of. They're not here. And like Tim said, didn't think about this. Divine. How did guys get out with the guards there?
As you recall, somebody else left the tomb with other guards from there.
Absolutely. But we can lie, can't we? We can lie and say this, that, and the other, that somebody stole the body, and yeah, you're right. Last sentence, wondering what could come of this. Verse 24 and following. I didn't write that down. What would become of this situation? What would become of it? These men supposed to be in jail, what would become of it, John?
Well, you would think, if they're so intimidated, which is what they're trying to do, intimidate the apostles, that they would take off and disappear.
Yes.
So they can't- So it's like, it's not working. These guys are illegitimate anyway. That goes back, we don't read about it in this scripture. The Sadducees are in power because the Romans put them in power.
Mm-hmm.
And as long, now they didn't want the Romans to be in power, but as long as we can run things, let us religiously lord it over everybody, and as long as we can be in power, we're gonna get along with the Romans, and it's because it's better that way than us being out of power. And that's what they're afraid of losing their power, that's what it's all.
Yes.
But they're not intimidated by it.
Verse 25. Then came one and told them, saying, Behold, the men whom ye put in prison are standing in the temple and teaching the people. Then went the captain with the officers and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should have been stoned.
Who do you think they're talking about being stoned here? Not the apostles.
Can you imagine stoning somebody? Did you ever think about that? Stoning somebody. Not with just little dinks so that it hurt. I remember growing up, we had a bottom area in front of down by my house where there was a backed up creek and water, and we'd get down there and check on the frogs. And every once in a while, we would stone the frogs. Something to do. That's terrible, isn't it, to stone somebody? But they did. And there's other examples, of course, in God's Word that they did. As we consider these verses, we know that God has a hand in this situation. Is that right? Those folks are not a whole lot different than the folks of today in some regards. People didn't listen to God then, and what about today?
I think the Apostle Paul is probably the most, I was gonna say the last, but I don't wanna say last because that's not the right word. The most current example of the apostles and their obedience to God's word. The Apostle Paul was stoned on several occasions. When something happens to you the first time, you don't really realize how bad it's gonna hurt. Once you've been through that, and it happens the second time, you know exactly how bad it's gonna hurt. You know exactly how the word's gonna make it. The Apostle Paul didn't let that stop him from being obedient. Jesus Christ appeared to him on the road to Damascus. And at that point, there wasn't anything that could turn the Apostle Paul away from Jesus Christ. And we need to have the courage and the strength to stand when times aren't good as a Christian, when people are saying things about you, when people are trying to diminish what you do and the good works that you do. We're all human, that hurts. We all have feelings. We have to have the courage to stand strong and do our best to remain faithful
Yes.
according to what the scriptures tell us.
You know those things, sticks and stones, break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's not even close to being true.
Sometimes words hurt.
Absolutely.
The sticks and stones.
Absolutely. A married couple, young. Honey, how do you like this dress? Well, I think it makes you look kind of fat. You telling me that the wife wouldn't be upset about that? I don't think so. Well, I was just kidding. Well, you know, Hallmark makes all kind of cards, don't they, Bill? You can get a card because you forgot the card. They forgot the card last year. But you don't have a card for saying something like that other than I'm sorry. Still won't change, but it might get better. What Jesus and his followers said then hurt people, correct? That's why a lot of them are upset and mad and would like these folks to be in, and power, of course, Charles, goes along with it, power and authority, and I understand that. But they're taking followers away. They're persuading them in a way that we don't want them to be persuaded, and that causes us to suffer.
When you look at the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, the high priests, their attempt to squash Jesus' teachings, it really didn't, and like John was saying earlier, it was as long as the Sanhedrin could rule, they thought they could live in peace with the Roman government. They feared the Roman government more than they feared God. And sometimes they didn't have the courage to live for Christ in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't believe, just didn't do what was proven. I don't know how else to say it.
The bell's going to ring in any moment, and I would like to get down to verse 29. And if you don't remember anything else from what we've said this morning, this is it. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. And that's what the message is that we're trying to get to you. No matter what's going on, no matter who said what, no matter where they are, no matter how many followers, we ought to follow and obey God rather than men. That's true today, isn't it? Why do you guys go to church all the time? We love God, and we want to obey what He wants us to do, and we want to be with Him in eternity. End of story. End of the story. Thank you for very good comments and discussion. The Lord willing, Caleb will begin there next Sunday. Thank you.